Sue called me and told me that you were studying this book. And I thought, oh, good, another book for me to read. Did Dee mention I read books all the time because on my radio show I'm always interviewing authors. And as a good interviewer, you want to read their book, right? I have interviewed 4 authors in a row, which means 4 books in a row. And then Sue calls and says, we're studying a book. Would you like to read it and come talk? Luckily, I have read this book several times. I've been using Mindy's work for years in my private practice. And I was so excited when she said, you're going to be talking about letting go, because you know I've kind of already given you that sermon, and about love, because you know I've kind of already given you that sermon. So I actually talked to Mindy Odlin yesterday. We're good friends, and she was kind enough to reach out and send her love to this congregation and tell all of you that she is thinking of you as you study this book. So, have you been enjoying it? Yeah, isn't it great? Today we're going to be talking about what Mindy defines as non-attachment, letting go. And she says that non-attachment is the ability to let go of the need to change, fix, or control outer circumstances. Easy enough, right? Just let it go. Easy, right? Why is no one agreeing with me? She goes on to say, it is the missing secret that allows your dreams to unfold into reality. Some time ago, I had the great opportunity to really sit down with Charles Fillmore's work and look at what he wrote in the Revealing Word, which is our dictionary of metaphysical terms. And he defines letting go as this: erasing from consciousness thoughts contrary to truth. Erasing from consciousness thoughts contrary to truth. I want you to remember that for just a little while. It's going to come up again later. Charles Fillmore further writes, it is just as necessary that one should learn to let go of thoughts, conditions, and substances in consciousness, body, and affairs when they have served their purpose and one no longer needs them, as it is that one should lay hold of new ideas and new substances to meet one's daily requirements. And therefore it is very necessary that the eliminative faculty be quickened in one, and a right balance between receiving and giving, laying hold and letting go be established. You may remember many months ago I did give you a sermon about letting go. Do you remember how I demonstrated that? Some of you, I know, remember because you've talked to me about it. You Facebooked or emailed me and said it made a difference. And I showed you that we have 2 ways of letting go. One is what we usually do in our human experience is we hold very tightly, and that control piece comes in, right? Name whatever that is that you're not wanting to let go of. Maybe it's a person, a place, a circumstance, a situation, your children, your parents, whatever it is. And you hold it so tightly, you almost white knuckle it, right? And when you finally let go, it's as though someone has to pry it out of your hand, right? And finally, we let go, and it falls, and we feel what? Empty, abandoned. We feel less than. We feel unwhole. And yet, if we could see visually that we can let go in a different way, it is simply that we are holding on to something, but when we let go to Spirit, to God, to the greater understanding, we can let go like this, and it just stays there. We don't have to feel abandoned or left alone. It's right there with us. And what happens in that moment is that when it's still there, we are also allowing for more to come. The love and the peace and the serenity that we were seeking is now allowed to enter. And that thing, that person, that circumstance can move. I hope that in your small group studies, you're really paying attention to this particular little cute story about Bert and Ernie. There is a wonderful little story that she writes in the book where Ernie goes to band practice, and he wants to play the saxophone, but he's not letting go of his little ducky. And so he starts to play the saxophone, and he's still holding onto his ducky. And he starts to play, and his hand is full, and he can't play. And so he goes to his band leader, whose name is Hoots, an owl. And the band leader sees what's happening. And isn't that the case so much of the time? Someone else can see what's happening. We just can't see it in our own life. And the owl says, if you would just let go of your ducky, you could play the saxophone. It's a great story. It's a great metaphor. She goes on to say that to get to the essence of thoughts that include a phrase in our thinking that says, in order to. I want you to think about this phrase for just a moment, because it is sometimes not said out loud, but rather thought and held in consciousness. And it goes something like this. I want XYZ in order to ABC, right? It's almost like the phrase that we often say or hear with the word but, B-U-T. Notice every time you say that word, it negates what you just said. I love you, but. In order to is that it's often that we want something in return. I love you just because, or we could say, I love you in order to be loved in return. Do you feel the difference in that vibration? In order to is not something that's really serving us, but Mindy is great in saying, keep it as long as you'd like. Play with it. Understand it. And then move from in order to a greater awareness that whatever you're saying to begin with is enough. Because that is the truer, the most true with a capital T thought. One of my favorite things about understanding this thing about non-attachment is to actually look at the greater definition of what attachment is. And have you ever been attached to an outcome of a situation? No one's agreeing with me this morning. You're all liars. We are attached to outcomes, or even how we think we should reach those outcomes. And when we do, we block the very flow of everything that we're wanting. We block the flow that opens the door to possibility. Non-attachment sets the imagination free to soar. I'm sure that Sue has already talked about imagination. It's represented in this book. It's one of our spiritual powers. It talks about wisdom, another spiritual power of ours. And I love this quote in Mindy's book. There is no creative power in attachment. There is no creative power in attachment. Our imagination is where creation begins. And there's no creative power in attachment. When you are attached to the outcome of something, the creation of it stops. We block the flow of it. So to get really clear on that paradox of non-attachment, we first have to get clear on the actual act of attachment. And the best description I've read about attachment shows up on page 81 of Mindy's book, which she describes as the greater difference in actually being the distinction of focus and attachment. She says, our focus, powered by our feelings, is sculpting our world every moment of our day. You may remember a little Chazism that says something like this: That which you give your attention to grows. That which you give your attention to grows. That's focus. When you're so focused on something, whether it's a flower, whether it's the sun coming up, whether it's a circumstance in your life, whether it's a loved one, whatever it is, that which you give your attention to grows in consciousness. The difference here is that of attachment. And she says attachment is focus, or the attention, accompanied by a burning drive to make it happen. It's okay to give yourself the attention, the focus, but when we attach to that, then we have this drive within us, this essence that just comes forth and says, now I have to work on it. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do something. What is the very opposite of doing? Being. It's the very opposite of making something happen rather than allowing it to. You know, we are pros in our Western culture about making things happen, aren't we? Many of you know my friend Bukeka, and Bukeka and I have been on a cleanse. We were doing a 10-day green smoothie cleanse. I don't know how she talks me into these things. So she calls me up. She's already read the book. She sends me the PDF. I don't need to read another book. Have I mentioned that? And she sends me all the recipes and says, okay, we're going to do this for 10 days. And we're going to cleanse. So I get out my blender. We're blending all this green stuff. Ugh. It sounds awful. It looks awful. And yet it was pretty good. My assistant, however, has since bought me some colored glasses because she was tired of looking at the clear, through the clear glass. So we did it for 10 days, and of course Bukeka and I are overachievers, so we decided we'd do it for 12. Sounds good. So Bukeka lost 12 pounds in those 10 days. I gained 5. I am not kidding you. I gained 5. When we started that cleanse, I had the thought, see, I'd already talked to Sue, and I had the thought, oh good, I'm going to let go of some of these love handles, and I'm going to be able to show up at Unity of Springfield and talk about letting go. That's going to be the talk anyway. So I'm going to talk about letting go of excess weight, of blah, 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 blah. Little did I know, 15 days later, I would be talking rather about my attachment to the outcome. Because see, notice Bukeka or the book or the thought never mentioned the word or the idea of diet. Guess what I thought we were doing? Dieting. Bukeka was in the flow. She was cleansing, getting rid of toxins, getting really clear and pure again. She called me and said, oh, today was kind of wishy-washy in my mind because it tells you on certain days what's going to happen. And sure enough, for them, it did. She had a moment of clarity just in her mind. She was driving and she just felt like she was floating. I, on the other hand, just kept drinking this green stuff and going and standing on the scales and waiting. It wasn't happening. But isn't that often what we do with goals? Mindy talks in her book about goal setting, and that is something else we're really good at in our Western culture. We set goals all the time, every day, whether it's about our weight or our finances, whether it's about our relationship to anything and anyone. And much of it, if not most of it, is that in the time that we're setting those goals, we are setting them as though they were attainable when very clearly they are not. We set them as if they are achievable, but so many times they are not. We begin to plan something, and then we say, I'm going to work at it. I have this goal, and I'm going to go after it. I'm going to do it. It's going to be my job to get it done, and then I'm going to put a timeline on it and make it happen at a certain time. Anyone with me? You do this all the time, right? The thing is, that's not how it works. If you've ever listened and heard and understood from any master teacher, whether spiritual or religious or philosophical, they've all shared the same idea. And that is that what they call a truth is actually a universal law. And that law is this: ask and it is given. And we say, well, that's only 2 steps. I need 12. But they say, ask and it is given. And we have in our mind, well, that's not hard enough. It can't be that easy. Ask and it is given. Well, that will surely never work, right? We have that thought. What we do instead is this: we set a goal. Think about a goal you set, whether it's about your weight or with your finances, relationship, whatever the case may be, something at work. And you set this goal and you say in your mind, I have this goal. I have a goal. I have a goal. We get really clear on what that goal is. We write it down. We make a list. And then we say, I'm going after it, as if it were outside of us. And then we say, it's my job to get it. Is job a positive word or a negative word? We say, I'm going to work really hard to attain it. Is working really hard positive or negative? And then we play tricks and we say, I'm going to tell somebody else so that I can be held accountable. So we're going to guilt ourselves into it, right? And then I'm going to say, well, now I have to do it. I have to work really hard because they know. If I don't do it, I'm less than. And so now I have this goal. So let me decide exactly how I'm going to torture myself and deprive myself and suck the very life out of myself in order to get it. How often do we do that? All the time, right? And we wonder why we're tired, we're lifeless. It's really interesting that when you can understand at a clearer level that which you want wants you, when you understand that what you really want is wanting you, and just allow it to come. She talks a lot in the book about allowing. It meets us halfway. But we had in our mind, I have to go after it, as if I have to chase it down, tackle it, rope it, whatever the case may be. I tell my clients all the time, when they come in and they sit on the couch and they tell me everything they don't want in their life, I just sit and listen. We say that all the time. I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this, I don't want that. And I finally take a deep breath and I say, okay, now that you're clear in what you don't want, and isn't that how we get to clarity about what we do want? Dee and I went to Jason's Deli last night when I got into town. I'm going around the buffet. Did I mention I'd been on this cleanse for many days? I finally get to have solid food. And I'm going around the buffet, and I don't think, Dee, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I got to the one thing that's on their buffet that I don't like, which is peas. I don't think I got there and argued with those peas. I don't think I got to the peas and said, you shouldn't be here. I don't like you. Why are you on my buffet? I don't think Dee heard me say, manager, would you come over and get these out of my way so that I can go on? Because if I had, guess what? I would have stopped there and argued, and what would have happened with the line behind me? Would have begun to stack up, right? I just noticed what I didn't want and gave all of my attention to what I do want. It was the greater abundance. Trust me when I tell you, I wanted everything else on there but the peas. And I got everything else, didn't I? Shut up, Dee. And so nothing else was blocking the flow. But how often in our life do we stop and argue with that which we do not want, rather than having conversation about the abundance of everything else that is? I told you she mentions the word allowing. And on page 82, she says, "The mind of God conceives the possibility of light and lets it come into being." I did look at Sue's messages online, and I know that she started this series with "Let There Be Light." If you weren't here, I invite you to go to the website and listen to that. Let there be light. It is the first day. It is the first thought. It is the first of all creation stories. And once the idea is conceived, we need only allow it to emerge into physical form, or even simply into the emotional awareness. Mindy says our outer circumstances will never change the way we feel within ourselves. The way we feel within ourselves will always affect our outer circumstances. Our co-founder in Unity, Charles Fillmore, said, "God's greatest gift to man is the power of thought, through which he can incorporate into his consciousness the very mind of God. I did not have a thought that I hate peas and then become so attached to the thought and believe that they should not be there that I couldn't move. I simply had the thought and I allowed it to go." What is so difficult about doing that on the journey of life? There's something else. Some time ago, I was writing a blog, and these are the words I wrote. "Events or situations themselves have no meaning. It is the belief we attach to them that instills the meaning." I'm going to say that again. Events and situations themselves have no meaning. It is the belief that we attach to them that instills the meaning. Really, haven't I given this sermon here before? But it is a little different, right? Sue asked me to do 2 chapters today, so I'm going to throw in the second chapter, and it's all about love. And chapter 11 of the book, What If It All Goes Right, is titled, "All You Need Is Love." I thought I'd come here today and sing some Beatles songs, and then that didn't work out either. Charles Fillmore says this about love: "Love never sees anything wrong in that which it loves." What if that just was our mantra? What if that was just a sermon in a sentence? Love never sees anything wrong in that which it loves. If it did, it would not be pure love. Pure love is without discriminating power. It simply pours itself out upon the object of its affection, and it takes no account of the result. It doesn't attach to the outcome. Our scripture today is from 1 John, and it says, "Let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God." You know, more and more, our science world is demonstrating the transformational power of love. Mindy talks in her book about studies that we have done in places like HeartMath that have to do with love, about how we can give our attention to something so much, so intentionally, that it changes the very DNA of that object. Do you remember, or did you ever watch the movie What the Bleep? Was that ever shown here? Good. There was a famous doctor in that movie named Dr. Masaru Emoto, and he did many studies around the molecule of water, and he gave attention to, and he demonstrated this beautifully in that movie, giving attention to and sending vibrations of love, of peace, of joy to just water. And then he took that water and put it under a microscope, and he saw it change before his very eyes. I encourage you to watch that movie. It is life-changing. Mindy talks about a study that was once done looking at the very strand of DNA once we gave our attention to it and watched it change, watched it reshape before our very eyes. Dr. Emoto is most recently famous for another study that he's done, and I encourage you to Google or YouTube this. It's the rice experiment. Anyone ever seen that on Facebook? He took 3 bottles of rice. He cooked the rice, just white rice. He cooked it on the stove, 3 glass bottles, put a cup in each one. Nothing different about them. Put a lid on them very tightly. No air got to them. And his only intention was this. He labeled the first one love. He put the words thank you. The second one, he put the words you idiot. And the third one, he just left. And so for the next 30 days, this was a month-long experiment, he went to each of those just once a day, and he spoke the words thank you, gave appreciation to this bottle. To the second bottle, he said, you idiot. He called it you fool in his language, Japan. And then he totally ignored the third one. Over the course of 30 days, he filmed this. And the one with thank you written on it changed not. It was as white as when he first put it in the bottle. The one with the words, you idiot, and that vibration that he said it with turned black. And the one in which he just ignored rotted. It's a pretty powerful experiment. When you Google it or YouTube it, you're going to find lots of people have demonstrated it over and over because they too didn't think that 30 days was quite enough. So one man did it for 160 days, except that he didn't make it that far because he just got tired of watching the same result over and over. And at the 147th day, he noticed that the one that said thank you, and he gave all of his attention to that, he could just eat it as if he had just taken it off the stove. The one he said, you idiot, and vibrated that was so gross. Ugh. Watch the video. You thought my green smoothie diet was gross. And the one that he ignored rotted completely. It just turned to mush. Think about that for just a moment. Think about what you're giving your attention to and how you're giving your attention. What you're directing to any person, place, thing, idea, situation, circumstance in your life. Maybe it's someone or something at work. Maybe it's someone or something in your family. Maybe it's something in your financial world, in your spiritual world. What are you saying to it, whether it's verbally or just vibrationally? Is it one of gratitude and appreciation, or is it one of less than? Or is it something that you've totally ignored? You'll remember I asked you to remember something at the beginning. It was Charles Fillmore's words. He defined letting go as this: erasing from consciousness thoughts contrary to truth. There was a bishop who died in the year 430. His name is St. Augustine. His writings influenced the development of Western Christianity. These are his words. Miracles are not contrary to nature, but only contrary to what we know about nature. It's just what we know about whatever is going on. And yet we attach so much of the time to the outcome based on a thought that was never true. I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes for a moment as we close. Mindy's instructions of how we what if and what if up or down can be life-changing if you get into it. Because what if you're giving your attention to something and saying and vibrating words that are negative, thoughts that are full of you idiot and you fool? What if we just shift our awareness and shift our focus and attention so that we can what if up? What if, beginning in this now moment, we let go of that which no longer serves us so that we can live into the greater expression of our higher good? What if we began to see these circumstances and situations in our midst not from a place of fear, but rather in noticing what is, and what shall be still lives within our imagination? What if the challenges of today bring us into contact with the very person or persons who encourage and support us in ways that give way to a love beyond belief? What if we begin to see this life not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be lived? What if we let go of all fear and just let love reign? What if we redefine love as the universal, harmonizing, unifying magnet which never sees anything wrong with that which it loves, and simply be and be allowed? What if we allow the intuitive nature within us to shower praise and adoration, gratitude and accolades, love and appreciation, and all manner of things good and very good upon every person, place, thing, circumstance, and situation that comes into our experience? And what if we choose to see every person who crosses our path surrounded by the light of the divine, enfolded by the love of all that is, protected by a power that is omnipotent and omnipresent, blessed by a presence so holy that their very footsteps were preordained to cross ours? What if I told you that I see you not simply as a spiritual being walking in human form, but as the very essence of divine love, which I hold in my heart as a part of me? And what if we look over at the other person sitting next to us and we see the face of God? I will see you next week. Thank you.